What if everything you built your life on was a lie? Marcus Everett had it all: wealth, power, respect. But beneath his polished exterior was a truth he desperately tried to hide. Tonight, one shocking betrayal will force him to confront the very past he had buried, shaking the foundations of his empire. This is a story of deception, courage, and redemption, proving that the truth, no matter how painful, always finds its way to the surface. Marcus Everett was accustomed to attention, admiration, and envy, but never disruption. The glittering ballroom of the Avalon Hotel, a beacon of prestige in Chicago's elite circles, was hushed in anticipation as he raised his champagne glass to toast his guests. Diamonds sparkled, tuxedos gleamed, and smiles radiated practiced sincerity, creating a tapestry of wealth and power that he had woven over decades. "To progress and equality," Marcus declared, irony hidden deep behind his polished veneer. The crowd applauded politely, unaware of the darkness that stirred beneath their feet. But before he could sip from his crystal flute, an urgent cry sliced through the pristine air. "Stop! Don't drink it!" Heads whipped around, stunned, searching for the source of the intrusion. Guards surged forward instinctively, converging on the young woman, now pushing desperately through the throng. Eyes wide and defiant, her voice shaking yet piercingly clear. "You can't drink it, it's poisoned!" Marcus hesitated, eyebrows knitting into a deep frown. Jasmine Clark, disheveled, desperate, utterly out of place, stood in stark contrast to the opulence around her. At 19, she carried the weary weight of someone twice her age, eyes reflecting the battles she'd endured. Her dark skin glistened under the chandeliers, a stark reminder of the line drawn invisibly, yet persistently, by the privileged guests around her. "Security! Handle this!" Vivian Everett, Marcus's young wife, hissed sharply. Her emerald gown shimmered, matching eyes narrowing with barely concealed contempt. "She's just looking for attention." "No!" Jasmine shouted, struggling as two security guards grabbed her arms roughly, their grips firm and unforgiving. "She did it! Your wife! She poisoned your drink!" The ballroom erupted in whispers and murmurs. Marcus stood frozen, glass still aloft, disbelief clashing with a hidden instinct to heed Jasmine's desperate warning. But logic intervened cruelly. Vivian, his wife, his confidant, poisoning him? Impossible. Jasmine's eyes locked onto Marcus, tears pooling as she saw the doubt spread over his features. "Please, believe me," she pleaded desperately, the agony of rejection clear in her trembling voice. Marcus slowly lowered the glass, a thin veneer of calm covering turmoil beneath. "Remove her gently," he ordered quietly, guilt briefly flickering before dissipating. "We'll address this later." But gently was a privilege Jasmine wasn't afforded. Guards dragged her from the ballroom, ignoring her protests as camera flashes exploded, capturing another scandal for Chicago's tabloids. Jasmine's cries echoed off polished marble walls, each sob reinforcing the chasm that separated Marcus's world from hers. Marcus turned back, apology shadowing his practiced smile. "Apologies for the disruption," he said coolly, raising the glass once more in defiance of the interruption. Yet he hesitated again, suddenly noticing the slight quiver in Vivian's painted lips, the flash of anxiety behind her meticulously sculpted mask. A small fissure appeared in his conviction, unsettling and insistent. "Is everything all right, darling?" he asked softly, watching her reaction closely. Vivian smiled brilliantly, perfectly rehearsed. "Of course, Marcus. Drink up." He stared into her eyes, searching for honesty, and suddenly felt a chill. The smallest seed of doubt was now irrevocably planted. Slowly, deliberately, Marcus set the glass down untouched. "Perhaps I'll wait," he murmured, glancing towards the entrance where Jasmine had been forcibly removed. "For now." Across the room, unseen by Marcus, Vivian's manicured fingers tightened around her own champagne glass, rage hidden beneath practiced charm. The room returned slowly to normalcy, laughter resuming, music swelling again. But the brief disturbance had fractured the facade of perfection irreparably. Marcus stood quietly, heart racing beneath his tailored suit, realizing that nothing, absolutely nothing, would ever be the same again. Long after the guests had dispersed and the last notes of the orchestra had faded, Marcus Everett sat alone in his penthouse suite atop the Avalon Hotel. The grand Chicago skyline stretched out beneath him, a glittering ocean of lights that reflected none of the turmoil stirring inside him. He loosened his silk tie, staring numbly at the untouched glass of champagne placed beside him by room service, an ironic echo of the earlier chaos. Marcus had always been meticulous, precise in his actions, decisive in business, and ruthless when necessary. Yet tonight, for the first time in decades, doubt had shaken him to his core. Could Vivian truly betray him? The idea seemed absurd, yet Marcus had built his empire by facing uncomfortable truths. He knew Vivian as beautiful, intelligent, and ambitious, but beneath the glamour lay secrets he'd always sensed but never confronted. Their marriage was part affection, mostly arrangement. Two ambitious people using each other to climb higher in society. Still, murder was another matter entirely. Marcus glanced toward the open laptop beside him. The screen paused on a grainy security footage, replaying Jasmine Clark's desperate entrance. Her anguished face haunted him. Something in her eyes had felt devastatingly authentic, breaking through layers of his practiced skepticism. He stood abruptly, pacing restlessly toward the wide window. Marcus's reflection stared back, a poised, confident billionaire, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, masterful in appearance yet internally unraveling. Beneath that polished surface lurked a darker truth he had buried so deep it rarely surfaced. His own past, his origin, the secret he'd fought his entire life to conceal. Marcus Everett was not born into wealth. He wasn't born into privilege. Instead, he'd clawed his way upward from poverty and prejudice, carefully reshaping his identity. He was Marcus Everett, a titan of industry, yet few knew he had once been Marcus Jackson, son of a black single mother from Chicago's neglected South Side. He'd learned early how unforgiving the world was to men like him. He'd changed his name, softened his mannerisms, adopted new speech patterns, carefully excised every trace of the impoverished black youth he'd once been. Society saw only the veneer he'd created, never realizing the painful truth hidden beneath. Tonight, Jasmine Clark's intrusion had reopened wounds he'd spent decades covering up. A discreet knock at the door startled him from contemplation. Opening it, Marcus found Alex Moreno waiting silently, his trusted investigator, a former detective who'd once stood courageously against systemic racism inside Chicago's police force, until the system crushed him. "Alex," Marcus greeted curtly, stepping aside to let him enter. Alex nodded, dark eyes serious, observant as always. He moved with precision, his gaze quickly absorbing details others missed. "Mr. Everett," Alex began, voice calm yet direct. "I took a look into the incident earlier tonight. Jasmine Clark's claims may not be entirely groundless." Marcus's pulse quickened. He gestured impatiently for Alex to continue. "I reviewed the footage," Alex explained. "Vivian's behavior immediately before Jasmine's appearance was unusual. She exchanged looks with Jonathan Reed multiple times. More importantly, hotel footage from earlier shows Vivian slipping a small vial from her purse into her hand minutes before the toast." Marcus's jaw tightened. Jonathan Reed, his closest confidant, had been by his side since the beginning through countless legal battles and negotiations. Marcus had never imagined a betrayal from someone he'd trusted implicitly. "Do you think Jasmine saw the vial?" Marcus asked quietly, hardly believing his own words. Alex hesitated, then nodded grimly. "She claims she witnessed Vivian adding something to your drink from the back hallway. But security dismissed her immediately, refusing to even investigate." Marcus's eyes flashed anger. He knew precisely why Jasmine had been ignored so quickly. A young black woman, homeless, voiceless, invisible. He recognized the prejudice instantly, painfully familiar despite his wealth and success. He'd worked his entire adult life to distance himself from such bias, yet it had followed him here, invading his carefully crafted world. "Where is Jasmine now?" Marcus demanded sharply. "Detained at the central precinct," Alex replied. "They're charging her with disorderly conduct and harassment. Vivian's lawyer made sure of that." Marcus inhaled sharply, the injustice stinging deeply. Jasmine had risked everything to warn him, yet he'd allowed her to be treated as insignificant. For the first time in decades, shame burned within Marcus Everett, igniting a fire long buried beneath luxury and denial. "Get her out, Alex," Marcus said decisively, voice hardened with resolve. "Immediately. I don't care what it takes." Alex regarded Marcus intently, sensing a fundamental shift within his employer. "Understood, Mr. Everett." As Alex exited swiftly to carry out his instructions, Marcus returned to the window. The city below now seemed strangely foreign bright, yet indifferent, unaware of the revolution taking place inside him. He understood clearly. Tonight had changed everything. Not simply due to Vivian's betrayal, but because Jasmine Clark's courage had forced Marcus to confront a truth far deeper and far uglier, that the prejudice he'd fought his entire life still poisoned everything around him, even his own carefully constructed empire. He reached for his phone, dialing Vivian's private number with cold determination. She answered quickly, her voice smooth, masking tension expertly. "Marcus, darling, are you all right?" "I need to speak with you immediately, Vivian," he said evenly, voice dangerously calm. "Of course," she replied, just a hint of anxiety slipping through. "I'll be right up." He hung up, a cold clarity settling over him. Marcus Everett had built his life hiding who he truly was. But tonight, the facade had cracked irrevocably. He realized he would have to confront not just Vivian's betrayal, but the reality of who he'd always been beneath the luxury Marcus Jackson. A man once silenced by prejudice, who'd unwittingly allowed himself to become part of the very system he once despised. Marcus stood tall, embracing for the first time in decades the fierce, unyielding determination he'd abandoned long ago. Tonight was no longer just about Vivian or betrayal. It was about reclaiming truth, justice, and his authentic identity, even if it meant burning his empire to the ground. By the time Vivian Everett entered the penthouse suite, the polished mask she had perfected was slipping dangerously. Her gaze flickered momentarily toward Marcus, searching, calculating, probing for clues that might reveal his intentions. Marcus watched her closely, seeing clearly for the first time the cold, methodical intelligence that had always lurked behind her perfect smile. "You wanted to speak to me?" she asked softly, affecting innocence as effortlessly as she breathed. Her eyes glittered cautiously in the muted light. Marcus stood quietly, observing her, allowing silence to swell oppressively around them. He understood the power of discomfort, wielding it deftly in negotiations. But this was something far more intimate and infinitely more perilous. "Yes, Vivian," Marcus began finally, voice ice cold. "I want to know exactly what happened tonight." She laughed lightly, dismissing his question with practiced ease. "A homeless girl tried to ruin our gala, Marcus." "I think it's obvious," Marcus interrupted sharply. "Don't insult my intelligence. There's far more going on here than some misguided disruption. Jasmine Clark insists she saw you poison my drink, Vivian, and Alex Moreno confirms that you acted suspiciously before her arrival." Vivian's perfect composure cracked, eyes flashing indignation. "You trust the word of a beggar and your disgraced investigator over your own wife?" "I trust the truth," Marcus replied sharply, voice tight with barely contained fury. He stepped closer, gaze piercing straight through her practiced innocence. "Tell me right now, Vivian. Did you try to kill me?" Vivian hesitated, only a fraction of a second, but that hesitation betrayed everything Marcus needed to know. Her composure, so carefully rehearsed, faltered irrevocably under his intense scrutiny. "I gave you everything," Marcus said quietly, betrayal etched deeply in every word. "Everything you ever desired: wealth, status, influence. Yet you chose to end it this way." Vivian's eyes hardened, and suddenly all pretense vanished. "Did you really think our marriage was about love, Marcus? You're not that knave." Her voice sliced the air with cold contempt. "I married your power, your reputation, your money. Love had nothing to do with it." Marcus felt a sickening wave of realization crash over him. He'd suspected her superficiality, but never imagined the depth of her betrayal. "And Jonathan?" Marcus's voice was icy, carefully controlled. "How long have you two been conspiring?" Vivian laughed sharply, disdain dripping from her voice. "Long enough. Jonathan understood my ambitions far better than you ever did. We both saw you clearly, powerful but blind, wealthy but weak, a black man desperately pretending to belong to their world." Marcus's jaw clenched tightly, the bitter truth hitting painfully. He'd known prejudice intimately, yet never anticipated hearing it from his own wife. Her words cut deeply, exposing raw truths he'd long ignored. "How ironic," Vivian mocked coldly, stepping closer, unafraid. "You spent your entire life hiding your heritage, erasing everything authentic about you just to win acceptance from people who secretly despised you. You abandoned your real identity. Marcus Jackson, the poor black boy from the South Side, to become Marcus Everett, Chicago's token billionaire. Tell me, Marcus, was it worth it?" Marcus stood in stunned silence, her words echoing cruelly inside him, tearing open wounds he'd long buried beneath layers of power and privilege. Vivian saw his pain and twisted the knife deeper, her cruelty relentless. "You think wealth erased their contempt?" she sneered. "It never did. They smile in your face and mock you behind your back. Jonathan and I simply decided to stop pretending." Marcus steadied himself, bitterness giving way to a deep, searing resolve. He had faced adversity his entire life, hiding from prejudice, ashamed of who he was born to be. Now, facing betrayal by those closest to him, Marcus felt something new emerge, clarity, stark and undeniable. "I should thank you, Vivian," Marcus said calmly, voice dangerously quiet. "You just reminded me who I truly am, and how foolish I was to think I needed validation from people like you." Vivian's eyes narrowed, confusion briefly flickering across her face. She had expected brokenness, submission, not defiance. "You think exposing this little scandal will change anything?" Vivian challenged sharply, regaining control. "I'll destroy you publicly. Your reputation, your empire, they'll vanish overnight. You'll lose everything." Marcus smiled faintly, a defiant, fearless gesture that unsettled Vivian profoundly. "I've lost far more by pretending than I ever will, by facing the truth," he stated firmly. "You underestimated me, Vivian. You both did." Vivian stepped back, unease blooming into something akin to fear. She suddenly realized the man before her wasn't the polished billionaire she knew. This was Marcus Jackson, the man forged from adversity, who knew survival intimately, who would not hesitate to burn everything down to reclaim himself. A sharp knock at the door interrupted their tense standoff. Marcus nodded toward it, never breaking eye contact with Vivian, as Alex Moreno entered the room, Jasmine Clark trailing behind, shaken but defiant. Jasmine hesitated, unsure, eyes flickering nervously between Marcus and Vivian. Marcus turned to her gently, the softness of his gaze startling after his confrontation. "Jasmine," Marcus began firmly, voice steady and sincere, "I owe you a profound apology. Your courage deserves my gratitude, not my suspicion. Tonight, you forced me to face truths I'd ignored far too long." Jasmine blinked away tears, taken aback by the sincerity she never expected. Marcus stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder, ignoring Vivian's disgusted glare. "You're not invisible," Marcus told her quietly. "Not anymore." Vivian's icy voice sliced through the moment. "You think sentimentality will protect you, Marcus? You have no proof of anything." Alex's calm voice broke through, firm and unwavering. "Actually, Vivian, we do. Hotel footage clearly shows you tampering with Marcus's glass. I've already sent copies to the authorities." Vivian paled, mouth opening soundlessly in shock as Marcus watched her facade shatter completely. He'd once found power in manipulating truths, bending perception. Now he found liberation in finally confronting reality head-on. "Vivian Everett," Alex announced coldly, approaching with two uniformed police officers stepping through the doorway. "You're under arrest for attempted murder and conspiracy to commit murder." Vivian protested angrily as the officers handcuffed her, eyes flashing hatefully toward Marcus. "You won't survive this," she spat bitterly, defiant, even as she was led away. "They'll destroy you, Marcus. You'll always be an outsider." Marcus watched silently, understanding perfectly the depths of her threats, and realizing he no longer feared them. He'd spent decades hiding from a truth he believed was a liability. Now it was becoming his greatest strength. Turning slowly back toward Jasmine and Alex, Marcus felt a calm, powerful certainty settling over him. He'd survived worse storms, and he knew instinctively that Vivian was wrong. He wouldn't be destroyed by truth. Instead, it was truth that would finally set him free. "Jasmine, Alex," Marcus declared confidently, determination shining fiercely in his eyes. "I believe it's time we started changing things. Together." Outside the penthouse, the city lights glowed brilliantly beneath them, unaware of the seismic shift taking place high above the streets. Tonight, Marcus Jackson reclaimed his name, his heritage, and his dignity, ready to face whatever consequences lay ahead. And as he stood resolute, Marcus knew without question that his battle had only just begun. The arrest of Vivian Everett exploded across Chicago's media landscape like a wildfire, viciously consuming the carefully constructed image Marcus had spent a lifetime maintaining. Headlines blared accusations and speculations, digging deeply into his past, gleefully exposing the long-hidden truth of Marcus's origins. Overnight, Marcus Everett, the polished billionaire darling of Chicago society, vanished. Replaced in headlines by Marcus Jackson, the son of a single mother from the South Side, who had erased his heritage to blend into the white corridors of power. The backlash was swift, brutal, and unrelenting. Longtime business associates distanced themselves. Investors panicked, and former allies sharpened their knives, ready to capitalize on his vulnerability. Marcus watched his empire tremble, shaken violently by the seismic revelations. Yet for the first time, he felt strangely liberated. The masks he had worn for so long now lay shattered around him, leaving only the raw, authentic man beneath. Yet freedom came at a painful cost. Every truth uncovered unleashed memories Marcus had buried so deeply he had nearly forgotten them. The grinding poverty of childhood, the cold gaze of disdain from wealthier, lighter-skinned peers, the harsh whispers behind his back as he struggled to rise above the stereotypes that followed him everywhere. Now, standing in the cavernous boardroom of Everett Enterprises, Marcus faced the board of directors, each face a familiar mask of discomfort and quiet hostility. "I'm sure you understand, Marcus," Chairman Thomas Greer said stiffly, eyes averted, voice dripping with superficial regret. "Given recent revelations, we believe your continued presence as CEO is detrimental." Marcus watched calmly, quietly, observing how quickly people he'd enriched and empowered turned against him at the first sign of vulnerability. "Detrimental," Marcus repeated quietly, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "My crime, it seems, is no longer being able to conceal the truth of who I am." Greer shifted uncomfortably. "You know, it's more complicated than that. Public perception." "Public perception?" Marcus interrupted sharply, eyes flashing. "Public perception is exactly why people like me have to hide who we are, because society fears a truth that makes them uncomfortable." The board exchanged nervous glances, eyes downcast. Marcus saw, clearly, that none would challenge him openly. Yet their silence was louder than any accusation. "Gentlemen," Marcus continued firmly, standing straighter, voice unwavering, "you are free to remove me from this position, but make no mistake, I will not leave silently. I will not hide anymore. If you abandon truth because it's inconvenient, then you've forgotten what this company once stood for. Marcus exited the boardroom with dignity intact, head held high despite the gathering storm. In the hallway, Alex Moreno and Jasmine Clark waited patiently, watching him carefully. They'd become allies, unexpectedly vital in ways Marcus never imagined. "Are you all right?" Jasmine asked cautiously, sensing his emotional turmoil beneath the confident exterior. Marcus nodded slowly, a faint, genuine smile appearing. "I've lost nothing of true value," he assured her. "The rest, power, prestige, money, are just illusions, and illusions shatter." Days turned into weeks as Marcus's world shifted profoundly. While publicly rejected by the elite, Marcus became an unexpected hero to many in Chicago's marginalized communities. His openness about his roots and his fight against entrenched prejudice resonated deeply. Jasmine's courage had ignited something powerful, transforming Marcus from a billionaire who had hidden his origins into a symbol of courage against systemic injustice. Yet danger remained close. Jonathan Reed, avoiding arrest through expensive legal maneuvers, orchestrated a vicious smear campaign. Media portrayed Marcus as manipulative, dishonest, dangerous, leveraging every stereotype imaginable to discredit him. Jonathan's message was unmistakable. Society would never accept Marcus Jackson. But Marcus stood firm, refusing to retreat into shameful silence ever again. Then one evening, late in his penthouse, Marcus received an unexpected visitor. Thomas Greer appeared at his door, unannounced, anxious but determined. "I'm not here as chairman," Greer clarified quickly, looking embarrassed, vulnerable. "I'm here because I was wrong, Marcus." Marcus regarded him silently, skeptical, yet curious. Greer continued nervously. "Jonathan approached me months ago. He and Vivian wanted me on their side. They promised if I stayed silent, I'd inherit your position." Marcus's fists tightened imperceptibly, anger flaring anew. "And you agreed?" Greer shook his head firmly. "Initially, yes. I admit I was blinded by ambition. But seeing what they've done, seeing your courage, I can't stay silent any longer." Greer handed Marcus a small USB drive, voice trembling slightly. "This proves everything. Their conspiracy, the smear campaign, the systemic prejudice Vivian and Jonathan leveraged to attack you. It's your truth, Marcus, and it deserves to be heard." Marcus accepted the drive carefully, aware of the weight it carried. Greer met his gaze evenly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope this helps make things right." As Greer left, Marcus stared at the tiny object in his hand, feeling a profound clarity. This was the truth he'd spent decades fleeing, the truth Vivian and Jonathan weaponized to destroy him. Now, it represented his ultimate redemption. Within days, Marcus called a press conference. No glittering ballrooms, no tuxedos, just a quiet platform before reporters. Beside him stood Jasmine and Alex, symbols of courage and authenticity. Facing a sea of cameras, Marcus spoke boldly, unflinchingly, revealing the detailed truths recorded on the drive. He exposed not only Vivian and Jonathan's conspiracy, but also the profound racial biases embedded in his own company's culture. His voice was fierce, unwavering, compelling listeners to confront uncomfortable realities. "I spent my life hiding my identity because society taught me that my origins made me less valuable," Marcus declared sharply, eyes blazing with conviction. "But no more. No one should be forced to deny who they are for acceptance. Today, I reclaim my identity as Marcus Jackson, a man who is proud of his heritage, proud of his roots. My silence ends now." The room erupted in flashes and questions, chaos enveloping the city once more. Only, this time, Marcus Jackson stood in the storm's center, calm and unyielding, a man finally unafraid of truth. Jonathan Reed's empire of lies collapsed swiftly afterward, investigators finally arresting him. Marcus's public revelation ignited a social reckoning across Chicago's corporate and political circles. forcing institutions to address their complicity in racial prejudice. Marcus's courageous stand transformed into a powerful movement, a demand for change. Marcus's fortune diminished, but his influence soared beyond what wealth alone could achieve. He established a foundation, appointing Jasmine and Alex as partners, determined to uplift the marginalized communities he once distanced himself from. Each morning, Marcus awakened lighter, freer, though materially poorer. But wealth had never truly defined him. It had merely distracted him. Truth, he realized now, was the only currency of real worth. Marcus Jackson's story became legend, whispered in Southside neighborhoods, celebrated by those who once felt powerless. He was no longer Marcus Everett, the billionaire hiding behind lies. He was Marcus Jackson, unapologetic, authentic, undeniably powerful in his truth. As Chicago shifted beneath the weight of revelation and reckoning, Marcus stood tall, finally himself, proud, fearless, and entirely free. The storm he once feared had become the cleansing fire he needed, burning away lies, leaving only truth behind. Now Marcus Jackson faced the future resolutely, certain of one thing above all else: no lie would ever chain him again. In the months following Marcus Jackson's explosive revelation, Chicago transformed around him. Once shuttered doors cracked open, long silenced voices found new strength, and barriers Marcus himself had once struggled desperately to surmount began slowly, stubbornly, to yield. Marcus's personal fall from grace had paradoxically become the catalyst for profound societal reflection. Yet Marcus knew the real fight had only begun. Prejudice wasn't dismantled overnight. Its roots were deeply entrenched, thriving silently beneath the surface of power structures and corporate boardrooms. Marcus, no longer constrained by secrecy or pretense, dedicated himself tirelessly to his new foundation, determined to create lasting change. Jasmine Clark stood beside him, now a powerful advocate whose voice resonated deeply within the community. Her once invisible presence had blossomed into prominence, her story now a source of inspiration rather than despair. Alex Moreno remained a trusted partner, fiercely committed to justice, vigilant against the very corruption and prejudice that once cost him his career. Together, the three formed an unlikely yet formidable alliance, reshaping the city's social fabric through courage and unyielding determination. Marcus's wealth diminished, but each loss became a victory of another kind, shedding layers of falsehood, stripping away illusions of power, revealing an authentic core long buried beneath wealth and privilege. He felt freer, stronger, and infinitely more connected to his true self than he had ever imagined possible. No longer bound by pretense, Marcus saw clearly, for the first time, that wealth and power were poor substitutes for integrity and authenticity. In stark contrast, Vivian Everett watched her empire crumble from behind prison bars. Her carefully constructed world of glamour and deception dissolved into painful obscurity. Without Marcus's fortune, influence, or protection, she was forced to confront a stark truth of her own. Prejudice and hatred were empty comforts, ultimately isolating and destructive. Jonathan Reed faced a similar fate, publicly disgraced, his career irreparably destroyed by scandal. His sophisticated manipulations and arrogant cruelty were laid bare for the world to judge. Marcus felt no joy in their downfalls, only a quiet satisfaction that justice had finally found them. Over time, Marcus Jackson became synonymous with authenticity, resilience, and courage. His speeches filled auditoriums, stirring hearts and igniting change, openly challenging the same institutions that once excluded him. He frequently revisited the South Side, walking streets he'd abandoned decades before, reconnecting with the community he'd denied. Each step reaffirmed his newfound purpose, grounding him in reality, reminding him constantly of his responsibility never to forget his roots again. One afternoon, a year after Vivian's arrest, Marcus stood before a crowded gathering in the heart of the South Side, preparing to deliver the inaugural speech for a new youth empowerment center funded entirely by his foundation. The building, bold, proud, defiantly hopeful, was a monument to possibility. Standing beneath it, Marcus felt overwhelmed by memories. Poverty, prejudice, hope, resilience. He saw himself in every face, staring back at him. Young people who now saw a future where they didn't need to sacrifice their identity to succeed. Marcus's voice resonated clearly, passionately addressing the gathered community. For years, I believed my true self was a weakness to hide, he told them firmly, sincerity radiating through every word. I believed success meant erasing my identity, conforming to expectations dictated by a world that refused to see beyond the color of my skin. But success, built upon lies, isn't success at all. It's imprisonment. Today, standing here before you, I am finally free. Applause thundered through the crowd. Marcus's honesty striking deeply. He saw Jasmine smiling brightly, tears glistening, and Alex nodding proudly from the sidelines. Marcus realized his life had taken him full circle, returning him to his roots stronger, wiser, and fully himself. The community now embraced him, not because of wealth, but because he dared to speak truths others feared. He had become their voice, their advocate, their ally. After the ceremony, Marcus stood quietly, watching the celebrations unfold. A gentle tap on his shoulder made him turn. Thomas Greer stood there, looking distinctly humbled. "Marcus," Greer began awkwardly, "I wasn't sure you'd want to see me again." Marcus shook his head gently, offering his hand warmly. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Thomas. I did. Why shouldn't you?" Greer smiled gratefully, visibly moved. "I wanted to thank you. You forced all of us to reconsider who we are. I'm leaving Everett Enterprises to start a diversity initiative of my own, inspired by what you've accomplished here." Marcus felt warmth spread through his chest, profound gratitude mingling with quiet pride. "Then perhaps change really is possible." Greer nodded solemnly. "Thanks to people like you, Marcus, it is." As evening settled gently over the city, Marcus stood apart, gazing at the lights flickering across the skyline, a city once hostile, now cautiously evolving. Jasmine approached softly, standing beside him quietly for a moment, allowing silence to deepen between them. "Did you ever imagine your life would turn out this way?" she asked finally, voice gentle yet curious. Marcus considered her question carefully, reflecting on the immense transformations he'd endured. "Never. I spent decades fearing the very truths that ultimately set me free." Jasmine smiled thoughtfully. "I suppose real freedom isn't about power or money. It's about embracing who you are without apology." Marcus glanced down warmly, nodding. "Exactly. It took me a lifetime to learn that lesson." "You know, Marcus," Jasmine said gently, her voice filled with quiet pride, "you've changed more than just your own life. You've changed countless lives by refusing to remain silent." Marcus looked out thoughtfully at the city, deeply moved. "If my voice helps even one person find the courage to speak their truth, everything I endured was worth it." "You've done far more than that," Jasmine assured him softly, sincerity shining in her eyes. "You gave people something powerful, a reason to believe things can change." Marcus smiled, the weight of her words filling him with quiet, profound joy. He had spent a lifetime chasing falsehoods, power, and prestige, yet found fulfillment only through authenticity and connection. He understood clearly now. Truth wasn't something to hide from. It was something to fight for, relentlessly, courageously, unapologetically. In that quiet moment, Marcus Jackson stood at peace, fully embracing who he was and what he'd become. No longer Marcus Everett, billionaire hiding behind illusions. He was Marcus Jackson, proudly claiming his place in a world still grappling with prejudice, injustice, and inequality. And he would never again be silenced by fear or shame. Marcus glanced upward, stars flickering gently above, a quiet sense of purpose and peace settling deeply within. His journey had been difficult, painful, nearly overwhelming, but every battle, Every loss, every sacrifice had led him here, to true freedom, genuine connection, and meaningful purpose. Marcus Jackson was finally home, and he would never hide again.